Hey friends, welcome back to Belle's Library. So I'm coming to you tonight from my new home library. My family and I have been spending the last couple of days putting together this room. We had a room come open in our home, and so this room used to be like my craft room, office, plus a few bookshelves, plus where the printer was stored, plus just kind of a whatever room. But now it is a library. So I have bookshelves all the way around me right now, and I'm sitting in a new chair my husband just bought me today. Got a little dust lamp, I got some stuff here. So I will do a kind of a reveal video sometime in the next week or two. I want to pick up some curtains and decorate and stuff, and then I'll show you everything, but it's really a blessing. I'm having a good time setting all this up, looking at all my books and realizing that I have, you know, like 4 copies of some stuff. So there's definitely lots of room in here to add books. So I'm really excited about going shopping and picking out some things to fill in my library. Tonight I want to talk to you guys about the books that I read in January. So this will be my January wrap-up video. I've already talked about the Nathaniel Hawthorne picks as well as Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington in my mid-month video, so you guys can watch that if you want some more details on those. I probably won't go into detail, but anyway, those were the first 2 I read. House of Seven Gables, and then I read a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne called My Kinsman Major Molyneux, and so those 2 were for the Nathanuary challenge, so I will make a wrap-up video on that as well. And then I read Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington, which I really enjoyed. So you guys can get more details on those on the January mid-month video that I made. I'll put it up here. All right, and then I finished Women in White by Wilkie Collins. I loved this book so much. It was so funny. It was so good. I ended up giving this 5 stars. So the story is kind of a detective novel, but not really. Like, he was kind of flirting around with the idea, but it was a mystery, and it has several different narrators, like maybe 6 or 7 even narrators. And I loved that. Usually I absolutely despise that kind of a writing style, but he does it so well, and it's so funny. And the characters, each of the narrators is so different from one another that you know exactly who it is that's talking. Like, it doesn't even have to be introduced. And they all just play such a great part in the story. So basically the story is there's this guy that has been hired to be an art teacher to a couple of girls. He's going to go live in their home and be like their, you know, art teacher. And so he is on his way there, and he ends up encountering this woman on the road, and she is all by herself and kind of like, you know, acting strangely mysterious, and she is dressed completely in white. And he helps her get like into town and kind of on her way a little bit, because she's like out on this dark road at night. It's sort of weird, right? And so she is the woman in white, and throughout the story she makes appearances here and there. We find out who she is and why she's important to the story. And then in the meantime, we, you know, switch narrators. It ends up the daughters both are narrators at one point. There's an evil character called Fosco, and so he is a narrator even at one point. And anyway, it's just such a great fun mystery. Just when one mystery is solved, another one pops up. There are great big huge explosive what in the world sort of plot twists, I guess, very far into the story, and so that just keeps it moving. It is such a fun book. It's over 600 pages, and I think this copy is like 650, but it is a fast read just because of the fact that he keeps it moving and keeps it fun. There isn't any that I can remember just kind of dead spots, right? So I really love this. I love how Wilkie Collins kind of does that Dickens thing where he names some of his characters with names that reflect their personality. So you had Mr. Hartright, and you know, Mr. Hartright had his heart right. He had the opportunity to do some evil things a couple of times, and he chose the right thing. You have Fosco, which is, you know, a play on Latin fuscus, which means, you know, something that's like dark and occultic. So kind of had that play. And anyway, it was just great. I super loved this. I will definitely be reading it again. It was very satisfying, good, fun read. And so, yeah, I gave that 5 stars. All right, and then next up was The Enchanted April by Elizabeth Von Arnim. And I despised this book so badly for like the first 330 pages. It's 360 pages long. So it wasn't until right at the end when I developed an appreciation for this book to the point of giving it 4 stars and talking in my review just about how much it had really affected me. And it's probably not supposed to really bring out as much emotion as it did for me, but I really, really despised a lot of just what was going on until, like I said, until very close to the end. So basically in the story, there are 2 women and they come across an article in the newspaper talking about how there is like an ad, right? And so it's like this villa is available to be rented out as a vacation home for 30 days in Italy and in April. And so they're like, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to go to that? And then they spend like 75 pages trying to decide if they're going to go and how will it affect their husbands and how are they going to tell their husbands and should I go and should I not? Like 75 pages of going off about whether or not you should go. And I really don't even like writing from this time, like women's writing from this like 1920s, 1930s era, World War I era. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I really have a difficult time liking or respecting a lot of the work that comes from women during that time. Maybe I just need to read different stuff. I don't know. But the thing that was just bugging me about these women is they kept just kind of being so worried about how their husbands were going to respond to them wanting to take this vacation for themselves, wanting to get away and do something for themselves. But they weren't depressed because one of them said to her husband that she was going and the guy's like, have fun, here's some money, see you when you get home. The other one was like, you know, kind of mad because there was nobody there to like make a sandwich, but he still let her go when there was no complaints. Like, but they just spent all this time like, I don't know if I should go. And it was just so blah. And I don't know, I guess for me, like I have 9 children, I homeschool. I have every reason to just sort of be like tied to my home, but I feel like if you are not making an effort to go out and have some me time, right? Whether it's just going for coffee for a couple of hours, going to the bookshop to look around, or even taking a vacation for yourself, like you really only have yourself to blame, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, if you won't take the me time, the self-care at whatever level you're able to do. So the women decide to go, and at one point one woman is like, it's so glorious to be able to pull the blankets in bed. And I'm like, listen, if you're in the bed with your husband and he's hogging all the blankets, like pull them. What's he going to do? Her husband wasn't the kind of guy who you'd have to be afraid of what he would do. So I know there's a lot of situations out there that people have struggles with. In this particular book, it wasn't like that. And so I just feel like if you want to be an equal, like be one. Take the dang covers if you're cold. Okay. The thing about the story is that it made me feel, and that was the whole point, right? It's what happens when you allow yourself to feel. So it turns out that there was actually 4 women that ended up in this house. The 2 that were first deciding to go, they kind of took a couple more on board to kind of help split up the bills, right? And so it wasn't too expensive for anyone. And in each character's story, they encountered a situation in which they had to start feeling. They had to be vulnerable and open themselves up to friendship or forgiveness or maybe recognizing their own faults or whatever it was. They all had to open themselves up, be vulnerable, and feel. And then what happens when you feel? And I was like, this is what happens when I feel this way about a book like this. Like, it was just making me mad. But it ended well. And it ended with a specific word, and that word was security. And so I'm not going to go into that because I want you to read it. But when you get to page 331, that's where it all turned around for me, and I started liking the story. It really actually proved my point that I was frantically jotting down in my journal, that the men in this story, they want their women to be friends to them. They want co-conspirators. They want, you know, people that they can talk with and share ideas and dreams and goals and interesting things, right? They want equals, partners through life. And I know not all relationships are like that. And so I'm not making a blanket statement, but this particular story really brought out what I have felt about a lot of the stories that I have read from this era of history where, you know, women are coming into having more actual, you know, social, civil rights, whatever, that a lot of times they are holding themselves back based on old attitudes and old ways of doing things. That it wasn't always, you know, the oppressive men with their thumbs on them. A lot of times it was their own mothers and grandmothers and, you know, teachers or whatever that had the thumb on them, that actually were holding them back. So a whole other story, probably shouldn't go into that, already did, sorry. But Enchanted April, I don't know if I will ever read that again. But I did keep it on my shelf just because, you know, maybe I'll encounter somebody someday who might benefit from that story. So right now it's staying in my collection, we'll see. But I gave that one 4 stars. But, you know, after reading about that book about women on vacation, I was like, I need a vacation. I need a vacation from this. So then the next book was bad and it never actually redeemed itself. And that is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I gave that book 2 stars. I found it to be wretchedly boring and utterly stupid. It was so much melodrama and not even a cohesive sort of story. Basically, there's a governess and she's supposed to be taking care of these 2 kids, and they are either seeing supernatural things or think they are, or trying to make her think they are. And then they don't. And then the end. Like, it's such a bad story. But the woman, the governess woman, is pretty creepy, and makes you wonder, like, what exactly is her relationship with these kids, because it's almost like just inappropriate. It's very weird. She's very attached to them. Especially the boy. I think she was totally psychotic. I don't know. I never want to read this book again. In fact, I can't even show it to you because I've already gotten rid of it. Like, it was bad. All right, next up was Clotel by William Wells Brown. So this book was featured on Nicole's channel, Noteworthy Fiction, and I had never heard about the story before that. But the subtitle is The President's Daughter. So Clotel, or The President's Daughter. This has been dubbed the first novel by an African American. I don't know that I would necessarily call it a novel, because it's kind of like stories that all have to do with each other, but each chapter kind of goes back and forth. It's almost like a soap opera, right? Where like you see a little glimpse of this part of the story, and then these other people have a story, and then so you go to them, and then you switch to this, and there's like 3 different scenes, right? And you're just going all between them, but they all really are part of the same story, but they're separate, right? Like, you know, Days of Our Lives or whatever. That's kind of what I was thinking as I was reading this, because they all have in common this girl Clotel, who is supposedly the daughter of Thomas Jefferson. It's kind of based on that, you know, story that at the time was kind of a rumor, and now we know to be fact. I think they did like DNA testing to find out that yes, Thomas Jefferson actually did have children with one of his slaves. I believe it was his own slave. And so anyway, but the story at the time it was written was kind of just a rumor that was a thing. But mixed in with those stories is kind of like some anecdotal information about true things, you know, actual factual, true, provable things that he knew of at the time, just kind of the way things were. And so not really a novel, but, you know, he calls them narratives. That's what I think that's a perfect word. These are narratives. So anyway, excellent compilation of narrative stories. As a piece of literature, it wasn't super well written, but as a piece of history, I think that it is priceless. It is absolutely invaluable, important record of history experienced firsthand by this author and the people around him. These stories were really hard for me to read and imagine. There's a lot of depictions about what was going on during this time of slavery, what would happen to people when they escaped and were caught. the fears that they had when they were escaped and not caught, but yet couldn't live in freedom. A lot of stories about the encounters that these people were having with, those who owned them and were, in control of their lives. It was hard to read. And, I was thinking, I've really shied away from stuff like this, about any kind of hard times like this, whether it was the slave days, the Holocaust, just hard things, even in today, the sex trafficking, all of these things. I've shied away from that a lot the last, 20 years. Because I've been raising my own children, and I feel like it was a lot of emotions that I didn't want to be stirring up that would keep me from being the kind of mom I needed to be to my young kids, right? And so I've really kind of been careful about guarding my emotions as a young mom to young children. But as they are growing and I am growing, I'm finding that I do want to go back now and just learn, right? And sort of understand these hard times in history and even in present day that I have been uncomfortable with reading about. And so it was a good experience for me to read this, but it was hard. I think it is so important that we keep these stories told in their proper perspective. But if we are not keeping these stories alive and reminding each generation of the potential for evil, for men to be, men, humankind, as I'm saying, to be so evil and to do such horrific things to one another, we need to be reminded that that is a possibility, and reminded how we never, ever, ever want to go back to that, right, for any reason. Just how horrific and heartbreaking and disgusting it is. And we need to keep that message going, definitely, so that it doesn't go back to something this horrific. So that was an important book. I'm glad I read that. I ended up giving Clotel 3 stars. All right, and then the last book that I read was Island of Hope, Island of Tears. This is by David M. Brownstone and a couple others. So this is a nonfiction that tells the story of people at Ellis Island, which, if you're not familiar, it's basically the place where immigrants would come in and be processed, I guess, to come into America. That was kind of the first stop for a long time. And so these are stories of mostly, was it Southern Europe, Southern and Eastern Europe, are the stories that are highlighted here for the most part. And when I started reading this, I was really into it. I was super intrigued. The stories were very interesting, and I was really all for it. But very shortly into this volume, I realized that it was starting to be very repetitive. And this, everybody's stories were kind of the same story. And so that part's fine because that's just the truth of history. But then it got to the point where they were actually repeating individual people's stories, and sometimes like word for word. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I already read that. So then it just got irritating. So I started off liking it, but I don't know that it's necessarily the best source for that information. I have a couple other books back here on my TBR about Ellis Island and just some of those stories. So we'll see if maybe I can find something that I like a little better than this one. It could have been a lot shorter just because, like I said, it repeats a lot. And it's kind of like, this is the person's experience in their country, this is the person's experience on the boat, this is the person's experience being processed, and now they are out in America. And it was just kind of like the same thing, right? So anyway, that was that. All right, so now for my current reads. So I am currently in the middle of 2 books, a fiction and a nonfiction. I started Breathing Lessons by Ann Tyler. So I talked about this in my last book haul video, I'm pretty sure. And I talked about why I picked up this book. So about 18 years ago or so, I had my first miscarriage, and I was reading this book while in the hospital, kind of going through all that. And so I didn't finish the book. And so every time I see this book and see Ann Tyler's name in general, like, it's just like, oh, I don't want to read that because, you know, it's associated with that bad experience. And so when I was in Barnes & Noble the other day and I saw this book and I was like, I'm going to read the back again. And I was reminded it's basically about a couple who has been married a while, and they go on a road trip, and along the way they have all these discussions about their life and just kind of like rehash some things, work out some things, and it's just kind of like this, you know, whatever, heartwarming, redeeming sort of story about a marriage. And that is what I had in my head of what the story was about. And what I had in my head was that this was an older couple that had been married for quite a while. And so in my mind, I'm imagining this older couple, right? So if before I picked it up this time, because I'm at page like 34. Before I picked it up this time, if you were to ask me, I would have imagined a couple probably in their mid-60s with grown kids out of the house, and you know, that had been married for whatever that is, 40 years or something. And so when I started reading it, I realized that the couple is like 40. So like, the couple is like younger than my husband and I. They're not old. But when I read it last time, I was only like 26. So, you know, they were old then. So, you know, the first part is kind of funny that I'm just like, now I have to imagine them as like my own self, which I am struggling to do. Partly because they bicker all the time, and I don't think I remembered that part. So right now I'm in like the bickering stage, but I think that it's going to get better. I'm hoping once they start having more deep conversations, that the bickering stops, because it's really, really getting on my nerves. But basically they are on their way to a funeral, and so it all happened really fast. They had to leave kind of quickly, and so they're unwinding right now, I think is what's going on. This drive is like all day drive, and so they're kind of unwinding. So a lot of negative feelings are coming out, but we'll see. We'll see if I can handle it. Because now at this stage of my life, not only like is adult fighting annoying, but I've had all these years of having many children. And so if you like live with bickering on a regular basis, you don't necessarily want to be entertained by it in your reads. But anyway, we'll see. My kids don't fight that bad. Okay, and then my nonfiction read is Confronting the Classics by Mary Beard. This is my first read by Mary Beard. I didn't really even know anything about her when I picked this up. I've since finding that she's actually written several popular books, and so I actually have her Vesuvius book coming. I think it's going to show up tomorrow, actually, for one of my Historathon reads. This is my first Historathon read, so I actually need to make that Historathon, like, you know, introduction video now that we're a third of the way into the first quarter. I'm a little slow, but I was kind of having a hard time finding some things that I wanted to read for Historathon, so for this particular quarter anyway. So this will be a good one for that. But I kind of have mixed feelings on it so far. I'm about page 56, and it is a compilation of essays and like reviews she's written, responses to things that she's written or read. So it's kind of like a book of her thoughts and opinions on things, and which is fine. That's totally fine. But the thing that's kind of bugging me is like she's letting a lot of her professional drama show. She kind of gives a lot of digs to other people and defenses of her own self when people were sort of dissing on her. And so it just kind of doesn't seem like super appropriate for like the general public who isn't aware of all of this behind the scenes drama that seems to happen within her field of study. Kind of the drama of her professional world comes out a lot in this, and I wonder if it maybe should have been called like Confronting My Colleagues more than Confronting the Classics. But it's interesting so far. This is my very first introduction into the classics, besides like the Bible, what I've been able to deduce about the Greeks and Romans from that. I don't know a whole lot. And so I came in this blind, just, you know, brand new, clean slate, ready to learn. And I am learning some stuff that is very interesting, and learning about how much we've believed that isn't probably even the truth. Just reading about like the archaeologist Arthur Evans and the restoration, quotes again, that he did at with the Minoan, like the ruins of the Minoan culture that he named, I guess, some of the murals, the frescoes and things that he found, and the work that they did to sort of restore them. Like this. She's talking about how they're just super Art Deco and probably actually didn't look like that at all. Some of them have had to be like restored because of the just obnoxious depictions that he or his people that were working for him made out of these things. Just things like that really surprised me. So the basic point of this book is to just kind of point out things that we've always thought to be true that maybe aren't actually true. And so that's interesting to me. But I don't have anything to sort of like counter or balance that against because this is my introduction. So in time, I will be able to probably look back and make a better judgment about how I actually feel about maybe the accuracy of this book or the the scholarship of it or whatever. It's kind of like when I started studying about the Victorians about 10 years ago. I didn't know anything. I just came in blind and started studying. And now I feel like I have a really good handle on that period of history. But it's taken 10 years of very active, focused, multi-dimensional study and immersion into that era to be able to understand it well. So that will be me eventually with this period of history, this classical period. But right now I really don't know. So I'm just kind of taking her word for it, kind of. But like I said, some of her lack of professionalism is bugging me. But for the nature of what these writings are, it's not necessarily out of place, if that makes sense. So that's it. Those are my January reads and my February current reads. So let me know if any of that is new to you or if you've read any of that stuff. What was your point of view? I'd love to hear it. I will be back with my Nathanuary wrap-up video very shortly. Also my Historathon announcement and whatever else I come up with. Oh yeah, my library review. Yeah, so there's some good stuff coming up in the next week or two. Hope everybody's having a beautiful day. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.